Five, four, three, two, one.
You're on the road beyond. I'm Todd Duplantis. Good to have you with us, and welcome back. Right now, we're taking you down back into history before conspiracy theories explode into the hall of fake news. Have you seen Oppenheimer? Have you seen Barbie? Nostalgia's all around right now, but there's some real fact in there, and sometimes it's very terrifying. You know, the Cold War was not always fake news. In the 60s, it was part of the ultimate fear of all Americans, the end of life as we know it. Scotty Barrett, my producer, joins us right now. Scotty, have you seen Oppenheimer?
I've not seen Oppenheimer yet, but I saw Barbie. What can I say?
You chose wisely. You know why? Because
3 hours
in a movie for more than 2 hours. Oppenheimer's like 3.5. Barbie's like what? 1 hour, 20 minutes at the most.
Oh, well, I still fell asleep at the end. Don't tell anybody. If you've seen Oppenheimer, you marvel at how we've survived the first plunge into the cold waters of the Cold War. And so more people watched Barbie, as I did. And let me show you something here. I went up in the attic, and I got pictures of my daughter's Barbies. And they all look like they've been through Armageddon. Look at that. The question must be asked, what if a mistake had been made and all those Barbies had ended up melted in a nuclear blast in a wasteland?
Well, you know, they're worth a lot of money now. I hope you can restore those Barbies because they're worth a pretty good penny right now. That paranoia was part of the early 60s, and it gives us all pause to realize really how lucky we are. Now, with us tonight, we've got a couple of people join us. First off, a comedian who survived the troubled time. It wasn't funny. It was the Cold War, a very real war. John Simmons is the creator of GNP Comedy in Washington, D.C., Gross National Product, as it's called. Over the last year, we've known him for a few laughs here on the show. He's played a few roles, and he was brought to us. I think you guys know each other, Scotty. You and John work together.
I've known John for more than 40 years. And outside the laughs, there's a dark and mysterious side to John Simmons that we all must know tonight. Beyond being a jokester, he was also linked to secrets of the Cold War. John, isn't that true?
Well, hi, Scott. I thought you would say dark and handsome, not mysterious. It's not that mysterious anymore. It's all declassified. And I've always said one nuclear bomb can ruin your day. It really can. It's gotten a little out of hand. Anyway, I grew up on like in the movie Oppenheimer. They had to make a special base, and they were worried about secrecy. And you might call it the first gated community, and then we got a little more intense as time went on. And I grew up on listening posts, as the eyes and ears of a nation are the most important thing in a Cold War. Signals intelligence started in Virginia, and they were listening to chatter from Rommel in 1943, and that was the prototype in Ben Hill. And then my father and my family would travel all over the world, setting up antenna and listening posts. That's where I grew up.
John, you saw Oppenheimer. Did the movie capture the paranoia as it kicked off the Cold War?
It was interesting because, it was interesting. In the end, the general said, I would never hire these guys. Remember that? And it was like, because they didn't have security clearances. That's where the whole thing kind of came out of. They had one Russian spy. And so it was a little more open. The environment I grew up in was a lot more paranoid.
I want to bring in Dr. John Moretta. He is a professor at Houston Community College. John, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the show tonight.
My pleasure.
I know John Simmons has memories of what happened, what he can remember during the Cold War. But from a historical standpoint, was there paranoia? Did we really think that we were going to get nuked by Russia?
That was, as an historian and also as a boomer who lived through the 50s and 60s, yes and no. There were, for political reasons, both parties were guilty of generating what we call in history the politics of anti-communism.
Yeah.
And that began with Truman, because he didn't want the United States. He had a great overarching fear, as did many of his advisors and others, Eisenhower included, that we would retreat back to isolationism like we did after World War I. And there was a popular movement within American culture and society that, look, we did our part, we saved the world once again from itself. So many Americans for a while wanted to retreat to that. The economy was booming because of the war. And Truman said, no, if we do that, we will have World War III on our hands. Now, we had the bomb. And when Truman dropped those bombs on Hiroshima, then Nagasaki, we must remember historically that, yes, he was bombing them on Japan to force Japan to surrender, but he was also bombing them on the Soviet Union. And by that, I mean, he wanted to scare the shit out of Stalin, because Stalin was already very aggressive. And so Truman, that was part of his containment, was going to be part of his containment policy formulated in 1947 with Truman Doctrine. But Truman, as much as I like Truman as a fellow Democrat, he is really responsible for creating what will become McCarthyism. He opened that Pandora's box because he needed massive public support, bipartisan support for his foreign policy, which in his mind was to prevent World War III, which he believed would happen because of Soviet aggression.
I'd like to jump in here.
Yeah, John Simmons, go ahead.
Listen, where we grew up, we would practice duck and cover drills all the time. The Alamo movie was shut down, and we lived in this little pressure cooker where nobody talked about anything. And the thing is that we were a primary target for a nuclear attack during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So for us, yeah, we were terrified.
Sure. I mean, we all were. But so if we all of us, we grew to adjust to it. Yeah, there was always that lingering fear. But for me personally, after 1962, the way Kennedy handled the Cuban Missile Crisis, detente with the Soviets, Khrushchev, that's when you had MAD. That's when both belligerents understood, oh my God, mutually assured destruction. We cannot have this.
But let's go back to that missile crisis, because, you know, when I've watched that in films and reading about it in history, that was the biggest ballsy move I think any president has made in this country.
Sure.
I mean, there was no doubt about it. You know, JFK basically told Russia, you turn it around or we're talking World War III and you're the first ones who are going to be taken out.
Yeah.
I had a friend, sorry.
No, he was going to invade.
Yeah.
He was ready to invade within 6 hours.
He was ready to do it. John Simmons, do you remember this from your perspective?
A good friend from Washington that was in the Naval Academy, and he was a pilot, and he was sitting on the decks of an aircraft carrier right in Cuba. So, I mean, we were really close. Like you said, mutual assured destruction. That was definitely, that was the deal.
Kennedy was a Cold Warrior. He really escalated the Cold War. He, kind of like a Reagan, believed that if you push the Soviets into a arms race, they cannot win it. And that's what Reagan did in the 80s. And as much as dangerous as that was in the late 80s, gladly it worked, but it was dangerous. And Kennedy had the same mentality until the missile crisis. That turned Kennedy around completely.
Well,
Scotty, do you want to jump in?
What ended up really happening, though, with regard to the arms race was that the military-industrial complex, something that Eisenhower had warned us against, really, really bankrupted the Soviet Union. I mean, totally. And then on top of Afghanistan, which happened later,
Right.
that was the final straw.
Yeah, but remember, they were able to keep up with us tit for tat at a great cost to their economy, to their people. And you're right, Afghanistan was a stupid mistake. That became their Vietnam, without question. That ended
Right.
the great Marxist experiment, and that's why Gorbachev gave up. No, I can't.
John Simmons, I wanted to bring you back in to this. When you remember when you were a child growing up in these bases, what would have happened? What would have been the atmosphere if war had broken out on the bases that you were on with your father and everyone there?
Well, I guess the remote stations with their antennas and the sheep and the beautiful Yorkshire countryside would be incinerated. Period. I mean, to be honest, they were in the movie Oppenheimer, they were talking about the difference between Oppenheimer and Teller. And Teller was the hydrogen guy, of which the nuclear weapons became more powerful. When the Russians dropped 50 megaton bomb, that's when you had movies like Dr. Strangelove and the greatest satirical movie ever made about the nuclear wars.
You gentlemen, I want to pose this question to you, and it's my own personal thoughts. When I remember studying about World War II, that we looked at the Spanish Civil War as the predecessor that set up the training ground for World War II, if you will, where we went with that. Looking at what's going on now, I've grown up in an era where I always kept hearing World War III is going to happen. World War III is going to happen. The world we're living in now, with everything that's happened, what have we learned about the Cold War? What have we learned about getting out of that? And where are we now? And how is that reminiscent to where we were then? I'll start with you, Dr. Marotta.
I think where we are now, I mean, the threat of a nuclear confrontation is always here. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Americans, probably the Russians worry about, the Russian people worry about a possible nuclear confrontation between us and Russians. There's a greater likelihood, that's too strong. There is that possibility more today, because I don't think Putin has the same mentality that the communists, that the Soviet leaders had all the way through Brezhnev. They understood MAD, mutually assured destruction. Putin, I don't know if he really understands. I'm sure he does, but I don't know if he really embraces it fully as the Soviet leaders did. Our presidents do. I mean, Biden certainly does. I don't know if Trump would have.
Yeah.
But, no, he's a lost cause. But most traditional American presidents that we've had would have understood this. What have we learned from the Cold War? Well, we're still engaged in arms races around the world.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, us and the Russians, I almost slipped and said the Soviets, are still engaged in arms races. And the Chinese.
Business is a booming. Business is a booming.
Business is a booming, yeah.
And Scott made a reference to the military-industrial complex, which is still alive and very much alive and well. And Eisenhower warned us against that. And in many ways, he foretold the power of that entity, which we witnessed on the nightly news in the 60s in Vietnam.
And don't you think that the military-industrial complex only lit the fuse to make Vietnam even more of a cost under LBJ? Oh,
LBJ destroyed himself with Vietnam. Could have been one of the greatest presidents ever. Destroyed himself, and he knew that's why he didn't run again. He knew it. Yeah, I agree. Tragic.
Scotty, I wanted you to chime in here because you've got your own personal experience.
Oh my gosh! When I was in third grade, let's show a picture of a B-52 bomber. I was in Puyallup, Washington State, at Maplewood Elementary School. And I would look up regularly and see B-52s flying overhead. We were 14 miles from Lewis, the military complex where those city killers were housed and launched, where they take off on their military exercises. And it was unnerving. And as a matter of fact, it became so unnerving that my father, who was working for educators, they made school desks. I remember the duck and cover.
Duck and cover. Get under your desk.
Duck and cover. Oh, what was it? They had a little animated turtle by the name of Bert. And I remember going underneath that desk, and that desk may have been made by my father's company. Well, he said enough is enough, and he took a job in Canada. We moved to Canada in '64. And what does that tell you? My father was careful in saying this: evolution may have taught that only the fit survive, but he said it's only the smart who survive.
Well, you know, Scotty, I have a story about the B-52s as well. I saw them. They did a great version of Rock Lobster in Love Shack. That was my generation's experience with B-52s, but I appreciate the story. John Simmons, I want to get back to you. Later on, you moved back to Washington, D.C. Now, if we pulled back the curtain on intelligence world back then, what was it like from your memories?
It would be ignore the man behind the curtain, for sure. I mean,
we do that now.
Yeah, well,
we try to do that now.
With eyes and ears business, it's all about communications. And now that we've got AI and all these other groovy things, the microprocessors that are moving in the worst direction possible are the snap count is now, that means the nuclear count is now instantaneous, and it's probably going to be automated. Well, it is probably automated. I don't know. I mean, I have no recollection, but the point is that the communications and the signals is the most primary importance to something like this occurring, to have it not occur before it occurs.
Dr. John, I'll refer to you from now on as Dr. John because that's so cool.
That's okay.
Let's once again, I keep going back to where we are today, because looking at someone who's looked at history over the years, we try to learn from history, but for some damn reason, we keep repeating the same damn thing, but with a different cast of characters and a different devil. So looking back, is there anything that we can say now that's not leading us to World War III?
Oh, I think if you look at the superpowers, I mean, even though I castigated Putin as not really understanding math, I'm sure he does. I'm sure Xi Jinping and Xi in China does too. The thing you have, I'm sure, and I think Scott and John would agree with this, I think what we have to be more concerned about, and this was true with ISIS and those extremist groups, is that atomic weapons or nuclear weapons were falling in the hands of these renegade states.
Like North Korea.
I.e. North Korea, because it's in my mind. North Korea. I mean, that guy, Deng Xiaoping, what's his name? Not Deng Xiaoping. What's his name?
Kim Il-sung.
Kim Il-sung. Thank you. Deng Xiaoping, I just dated myself.
I think, no, more than that, I think they're synonymous.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Kim Il-sung, I mean, he looks like an idiot with that stupid haircut and all that. He's a hipster. But you like that? At the same time, I think he is smarter than he projects and portrays.
Yeah.
I mean, he made a monkey out of Trump. I mean,
God,
that was just embarrassing. That was just humiliating.
Well, I have one thing to add about him. All you have to do is visit Mar-a-Lago and go into the shower. There it is. You got everything you need, right? You don't need you don't need the Puzzle Palace.
Yeah, no. But I think that's just to summarize real quick, and I want to take anything away from my other guests. I think the greatest fear is that the possibility of one of these renegade states or renegade terrorist groups or organizations gaining access to that kind of weaponry, that could ignite something.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Renegade North Korea.
Yeah.
Let's say renegade some Middle Eastern countries. Renegade Ukraine.
Not Ukraine, no. I am confident, and I could be totally wrong and idealistic and myopic, but I think we've got...
You join a think tank.
Yeah. I
but
should.
We're sending them carpet bombs.
Yeah.
Cluster bombs.
Yes, correct. But I think there's going to be the caveat with the Biden administration and whatever administration is next. Hopefully it's not Trump. But I think if you have a sane next president, there'll always be the caveats to that.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about the Ukraine. Pakistan, you might have put Pakistan on the list.
Yeah. I think you really need to worry about Russia and Putin and its arms dealings with not just China, but also North Korea, and how Kim needs money and Russia's got money, and the weapons will flow. And could there be a nuclear in that mix? We don't know. There's no way we could know.
No.
But North Korea at least is testing it out. It seems like every other week they're looking at something out.
Yeah. But remember, a lot of that for his own public consumption and bravado, his image in the world. He wants to be a player.
One thing I wanted to bring up too is the Cold War did bring about something I think that was fascinating, though. It kind of sparked an interest in science fiction. Maybe we could talk about that a bit. John Simmons, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, my favorite line from Dr. Strangelove is always, "Gentlemen, no fighting in the war room." And of sorts, there was the mine gap shaft, or I don't know, whatever, when everybody was dead and they had, they were worried about repopulating, and then crazy Dr. Strangelove went down with the Russians, and all that stuff. But in terms of war games was a good one. Also, the one that I go back to about signals is the Imitation Game. If you remember that one, that was about the invention of a computer that could crack codes. And the whole thing is cryptology is basic to what I'm talking about. These are the kind of people that I'd hang out with, right? I didn't know what they're talking about, but I was too young. But anyway, the nature of cryptology and beyond was they're trying to always break codes. And the Imitation Game, although it was a factual, it didn't come out, I don't know, that story didn't come out for 50 years, that Her Majesty's Secrets, and look what happened to the poor guy. It was like Oppenheimer. They always get, screwed by their government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. John, what's your thoughts? Science fiction, a result of the Cold War, or maybe?
Well, I think Hollywood capitalized on that. I mean, the classic of we keep focusing on the 60s, but we got to, to me as an historian, the 1950s were far more hysterical.
The day the earth stood still.
Yes. And you got the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original. Those were classic pictures. And because of McCarthyism, I think you had a greater communist hysteria in the country in the 50s. I remember this because I was a kid in the 50s. Was greater in the 50s than it was in the 60s. Our generation, all of us in this space right now, we're 60s products. And by the time we reach college and high school and college, all of us, the fear of communism had diminished greatly, particularly among student activists. And I think, but the bomb always lurked. And if you look at the Port Huron statement Tom Hayden wrote, creating the SDS manifesto, there was a concern there. But as you move through the 60s, I think that fear diminished. And I think the 50s, that generation, my parents, your parents, was far more hysterical than our generation was.
I just want to butt in about science fiction. I think we're in the age of the Teledyne Corporation, the Terminator movies.
Yeah.
It's that's where we're at now.
I think so.
We talked about that about a month and 2 months ago with AI. Yeah. That's exactly what we're thinking of. Yeah. One thing that always struck me, I'm a big fan of the Twilight Zone.
Oh my God.
And those episodes seem to reflect society, especially the one where everybody was trying to get into the bomb shelter.
Yes.
If you remember that episode,
Yes.
I mean, they always seem to reflect something going on in society at the time. Kind of like the Saturday Night Live of the 60s and 50s, I mean,
yeah, true. Twilight Zone was classic.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that is at least from my own personal standpoint.
Science
fiction.
Without question.
Well,
Scotty?
the day the Earth stood still
Yeah.
had a remake with Keanu Reeves, which was stupendous and dealt with nanonites and
Oh, I
All
thought
of
you meant
those issues.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I thought that's what you meant.
The original was the best.
Yeah, yeah.
Gentlemen,
Well-
we appreciate you being here. John Simmons, GNP Comedy. Thanks for joining us. I think we need to revive Bunker Bob again. We need to,
No more Bunker Bob. Okay, well,
We gotta
want
get
you
him back
coming
on the
as
show.
Bumper
Yeah.
Bob.
okay, let's do a
Bob.
3-hour special on just him.
just Bunker Bob. We need to get him back on.
Yeah.
Dr. John Moretta, author of The Hippies. Check it out if you haven't. Great book. HCC professor. We're proud to have you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Good to see everybody.
Scotty, always good to see you.
Good to see you, Todd.
And, we're live just about every Monday night when we can come up with a new show for you. We're going to try so next week. So we'll see what we can do. Signing out for tonight, I'm Todd Duplantis. You're on the road beyond. Look for us on Facebook. We're also on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. We're on Twitter. And you can follow me on Instagram at Todd Duplantis 65. Have a great week. I'm Todd Duplantis. We'll see you next time.
See you. Bye.